Hello everyone, Cayman the Skunk here, and now that Zootopia Plus has been released, I want to talk about the series for a little bit while also talking about the movie more. I didn't feel that I talked enough about the stereotypes and the world of the final film very well in my original video, so I want to go back to that while also talking about a few other things. The disclaimers are pretty much the same as before, so expect spoilers for Zootopia and Plus, a little profanity here and there. I did my best regarding my research, but I know I might have gotten a few things wrong. I can't help my voice, but you'll have to endure it if you want to hear my opinions, and that these are just my opinions and you don't need to agree with them. So let me start off by saying that I didn't have high expectations for Zootopia Plus, especially considering that it was released almost 2 years after it was announced instead of coming out much earlier, around spring of 2022, but was pushed back to November 2022 for unknown reasons. While I'm talking about the release, they only released a teaser trailer for the show a mere 11 days before it premiered. This felt very odd to me, especially when they announced the names of the episodes in September this year, but we didn't get a teaser at the same time. Why they chose to release the episode names but only release the trailer days before the show aired, I'll never know. But I digress. So, as I just said, my expectations weren't very high. I didn't expect them to answer any of the questions problems that I brought up in my first video. I only brought it up there because I was pretty sure that some people in the comments would likely use it as an argument against any of the points I originally made. If anything, it hardly answers any of the smaller problems in the final film, and it could be skipped and viewers wouldn't miss much. I'm surprised that they didn't, or so far, haven't announced that they were making a sequel, especially when considering that Wreck-It Ralph and Frozen both got sequels 6 years after they came out, and who knows if Zootopia will end up getting one. But I don't feel it's worth rewatching, even though they are just shorts. I can see other people enjoying it more than me, and more power to you if you like it. But now, onto the stereotypes of the final film. I find it a little unusual that after deciding to drop the tank collars from the old version, that they decide to focus more on animal stereotypes and biases. While I can give credit for Disney trying to focus on a hard-to-handle subject, I don't think it worked in the final film. First off, I understand rabbits and bunnies being very agile since they're known for that in real life, but where did the stereotype of them being small, harmless, and weak come from? As someone born in the early 90s, I grew up watching my fair share of cartoons, and based off something like Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny was a trickster and pretty fast, but he sure wasn't harmless or weak. So why would Disney think people believe those things about rabbits? Regarding foxes, I feel that they contradicted the stereotypes about them in the exact movie. As I mentioned in my original video, Gideon Grey was never shifty or untrustworthy. He was just a regular asshole bully, so he doesn't fall under the same category as Nick, and he wasn't even that shifty or untrustworthy. If we're going by Disney's own films, Robin Hood was only shifty because he robbed from Prince John to help the poor, so it was for a good reason. Todd from The Fox and the Hound wasn't very shifty either, which makes sense because he was raised by a human. He was mostly just overconfident. Going back to Nick, when he was fucking with Judy when she blackmails him into helping her case, as I had mentioned before, he has no obligation to help her since he showed her where he last saw Otterton and was no longer any more use to her. So he did what he did because he was being forced to do something he had no obligation that he had to do. Regarding biases, it's hard to express well because biases are based on personal life experiences. The problem I have is that based on what we saw in the final film, I'm unable to believe that Judy and Nick would have their biases. We were only shown that single incident with Gideon Grey, and there were no indications that there were any other incidents between the two or that they attended the same school or anything like that. Then we cut to 15 years later, and we never learn about anything that happened during those years, so I'm unable to believe she'd still have her bias after that single incident and nothing else. Regarding Nick, it's pretty similar. We have the incident where he was muzzled by the Junior Ranger Scouts and that led to him becoming a walking stereotype. As I stated in my previous video, where did he even learn about the stereotypes associated with foxes from? One can assume from Finnick, but even then he didn't start doing his cons until years after the incident, and he felt the best thing to do was to never tell his family or anyone close to him about what happened, and so he ends up becoming a walking stereotype instead of getting any help. Shit, Bellwether would have been a much more interesting character if we had any real development with her to believe her plan. But all we know is that she's the assistant mayor, and nothing about why we'd believe she'd have her bias - hatred for predators, and more importantly, when she even started her plan to want to make predators go savage to spread fear throughout the city. Because of this lack of development with characters, it's hard to feel anything towards them because they aren't relatable for most of the audience. Now, normally this is where I'd wrap things up and all that, but I have 2 more things I want to talk about before I finish up. They won't take too long since I wanted this to be shorter than the other video, being a follow-up. The first topic is about the world of Zootopia and what the people working on the movie said regarding removing the tame collars and wanting to use stereotypes and the world of Zootopia.
In the beginning was this place that the predator characters had to wear these collars that would give them a shock if they, if they had like bad thoughts or they became too emotional, and that's kind of what created the peace between the predators and prey.
We kept working with it and working with it, and all of us would look at it and go, oh yeah, this is really clever, it's interesting and all like that, but there was something that kept just gnawing at all of us, of saying like, we're showing this beautiful world and we're showing it being kind of like unfair from the very beginning.
It was really kind of tricky because we wanted that wonderful intro of Zootopia, and we wanted an optimistic view of tame collars and our world, but in a way that's sort of an allegory.
That's for making me the baby. I'm a grown mammal, fennec fox. It is degrading to my entire species.
Relax, you're gonna buzz yourself.
I am in a diaper!
It was brought up earlier in story trust meetings, and a lot of people brought up, you could tell the story without the collars. I think that collars could be muddying things up.
After every screening, it was really the first thing everybody kept talking about, and then we would kind of change it and rework it and stuff to soften it, to make it, and we kept trying. And there were some great moments with that. There was a really emotional moment when a young mammal becomes of age. They got their collar on, and the little kids would look at it saying, oh, I'm gonna grow up, but the parents know there's a sadness to it of when they have to put this on their young child.
Morris.
And it was always really emotional, that scene, in what we were showing, so we felt like we had something going on.
But it put us in a situation where, of course, the world is biased against animals like Nick, against predators. Prey animals don't like predators. It makes sense, but it was very obvious.
Now, Pixar hadn't seen anything from Zootopia, nothing. We showed it to them, and the notes that we got back was so profound because it was what I think all of us were feeling deep inside, but we just kept trying to work around it. But they gave us the cold, hard facts and truth about what we were doing.
And they said, I admire what you're trying to do here. You're trying to make us love this world of animals and make it seem fun, but from the get-go, I don't like the idea of collars, and it's preventing me from enjoying the movie.
I want to love this world, but because of the collars, from the very beginning, I hate this world. You should rethink things so that make us love the world, and then potentially see it get broken.
As shown in this clip, the tame collars were removed because it was preventing the creators from loving the world of Zootopia, so they scrapped the collars and focused on stereotypes and biases instead, and we have the final product. Aside from what I already said about stereotypes in the final film, and the fact that certain stereotypes are just traits of animals like sloths being slow and rats being fast because of their biology, I didn't like how they changed things, mainly because they wanted people to love the world and they didn't love it in the tame collar version. I seriously don't know where they were coming from with this idea. I'm not an expert on telling stories myself, but from what I understand, one way to keep your story interesting is not to make the world the main focus. The world a story is set in should be believable and have rules and logic to follow. But in a story, the audience is supposed to be more invested in the characters than the world. The world is the setting where a story takes place, and the audience should have a good understanding of it, but it's not meant to be the focus of a story. On top of that, you can have a world that's not perfect and has problems as long as you're not putting the world before the characters. As I mentioned in my other video, the Tame Collar Virgin reminded me of Wreck-It Ralph and Aladdin because they didn't put the focus on the world. It was more about the characters, and I felt more towards them because of the proper development, unlike the characters in the final version of Zootopia. And even then, like I stated in my previous video, we still didn't get to see an awful lot of the world in the final film. The Tame Collar Virgin had far more locations shown when compared to the final film, where we didn't get to see many locations. Even Zootopia Plus didn't really show us too many new locations. Before I wrap things up, I'll quickly go over how I would have handled things. First, the Tame Collar version of the story still plays out like it was supposed to. Then, the sequel takes place a few years after Swinton is taken down and things change for all the predators. Then, animals start going savage again like they did in the final film, and Bellwether would be the main bad guy like before, but this time, she's being driven by wanting to continue off where Swinton started and tries to get the predators exiled or something like that. I don't really have things fully planned out. The main difference is that Judy and Nick naturally wouldn't be the stars of the movie, but they could be major supporting characters. I was thinking of making the original duo from the first idea, Jack Savage and Sky, the main characters. But that's all I have for how I would have handled things if I could rewrite the movie. But now, my final thoughts. My feelings towards the final version of Zootopia are mostly the same as what I said in my previous video. It's not a bad film by any means, I just think that it was too ambitious and a bit of a disappointment when compared to the Tame Collar version. They focused too much on the world and not enough time was spent on proper character development. And some might say that I'm taking this too seriously and that I should give it some slack because it's for kids. To that I say, Zootopia has a PG rating in America, and most of the other movies I showed in a picture of my current Blu-ray collection, now updated, have the same rating as Zootopia, and they handled their themes better, and they're made for the same audience. They handle the themes in Wreck-It Ralph better, and I feel it deserved its PG rating. The director of it also directed Zootopia, even though he also directed the sequel to Wreck-It Ralph, and that's the kind of worms I don't want to open up, so take from that what you will. Thanks for watching.